Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into something you're doing right this second. Something so automatic you probably don't even think about it, reading. We're going to uncover the settled science behind how your brain learned to do it and why, for so many people, it's a real struggle. Let's think about this for a sec. Speaking, that's something our brains are kind of pre-wired for. We're born ready to learn to talk. But reading? That's a whole different ballgame. It's an invention, only a few thousand years old. So how in the world does our ancient brain learn this brand new trick? Is it just natural, or is it something our brain has to build from scratch? Okay, first things first, let's clear up a really common misconception. When people say the science of reading, they're not talking about a curriculum you can buy or some newfangled program. It's not a brand. Think of it more as a huge body of research built over decades, where neuroscientists, psychologists, and linguists all kept arriving at the exact same conclusions about how our brains learn to read. All right, so to really get our heads around this, we can start with a basic model that breaks the whole thing down into a simple but incredibly powerful formula. And here it is, the simple view of reading. It looks simple, but man, is it powerful. It boils down to this. To have reading comprehension, to actually understand what you're reading, you need two things working together. You need decoding, which is just being able to turn the letters on the page into sounds, and you need language comprehension, which means you have to know what the words mean. You gotta have both, no exceptions. And that little X in the middle, that's not just for show, it's the whole shebang. It's multiplication, not addition. And that changes everything. It means if either one of those skills is at zero, the entire equation just flatlines. You could have the biggest vocabulary in the world, but if your decoding skill is zero, you get zero comprehension. It's the gatekeeper. So how do we get lightning fast at decoding? How do we go from sounding out C-A-T to just seeing the word cat and knowing it instantly? It happens through a cognitive process called orthographic mapping. You can think of it like the brain creating a super fast mental filing cabinet. It permanently links a word's spelling to its sounds and meaning, so it becomes a sight word that we recognize in a split second. Okay, that's the what. Now for the how. What is actually physically happening inside our heads to make all this work? This is where the neuroscience gets really, really cool. You see, our brains don't have a built-in reading center just waiting to be switched on. Nope. Instead, they have to perform this incredible act of, neural hijacking. Neuroscientists call it neuronal recycling. The brain takes a part of our visual system that evolved for recognizing things like faces and tools, and it retrains it for a totally new job, recognizing letters. And the part that gets hijacked, it's called the visual word form area, but a much better name for it is the brain's letterbox. It's this one specific spot that gets a brand new job. Become an expert at seeing letters and written words. And here's the kicker. This letterbox doesn't just form on its own. It has to be physically built through the hard work of learning letter-sound connections. And we can literally see this happening. We've got the receipts. Look at these brand scans. When researchers show skilled readers written words, that letterbox lights up like a Christmas tree. But show them other complex images, like objects or faces, not so much. That little patch of brain has truly become a specialist. So, this is huge. If the brain has to build this reading circuit, it begs the question, how do we teach in a way that gives it the right tools and blueprints for the job? What does this mean for our schools? The science shows us there are basically two roads you can take. One road builds that super efficient reading highway in the brain by explicitly teaching the connections between letters and sounds. The other road, it actually encourages kids to guess words from pictures or context. And you know what the brain scans show? That's what struggling readers do. We're literally training their brains to use inefficient strategies. And this all leads us to a really clear instructional playbook, what experts call the 5 pillars of reading. It's like building a house. You can't put the roof on before you've built the foundation. You start with hearing sounds in language. Then you connect those sounds to letters with phonics. That practice builds fluency, which then frees up the brain to focus on the end goals, growing your vocabulary and really understanding the text. You just can't skip steps. And here's the thing that should really make us sit up and pay attention. The timeline here is crazy short. Neuroimaging studies show that we can see these physical differences in the wiring of a kid's brain after just 6 months of school. This isn't just a theory. It's a developmental race against the clock. Okay, so if the science is so clear-cut, so settled, why isn't this happening in every classroom? Why are we even having this conversation? And that brings us to the final and honestly, the toughest part of this whole story. This isn't some new debate that just popped up. There has been a massive, decades-long disconnect between what scientists knew and what was actually happening in classrooms. For years, popular ideas that directly contradicted the evidence, like whole language, took hold in our schools, and that created a crisis that we're only now really starting to confront. Today, the real challenge isn't about the science anymore. It's about something called implementation fidelity. It's a fancy term for a really simple idea. Are you actually following the recipe correctly? You can have the best scientifically proven recipe for a cake, but if you leave out the flour or bake it at the wrong temperature, you can't blame the recipe when you get a mess. And there are so many ways this can go off the rails, right? Maybe teachers don't get the right training and support, or they're handed a program without any say, so there's no real buy-in. But maybe the most dangerous problem is what's called instructional dilution. When schools try to mix a little bit of the new science with a lot of the old, disproven guessing strategies. It just creates a confusing mush that doesn't work. So, this is where we are now. The science of reading revolution isn't about winning a scientific argument anymore. That battle's been won. Now, it's all about execution. It's about closing that huge gap between knowing what works and actually doing it consistently for every single kid in every single classroom. Which leaves us with one final, and I think pretty challenging question. For years and years, the argument was about the science. Well, guess what? The science is settled. The real question now is our educational system actually ready to listen, and more importantly, to act on it?